And with that, I just want you to kind of be on the lookout for some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to show this up to the screen. So, you know, in the PowerPoint that Abby's doing today, she may be touching on some of these features that you can see up front. This is a model, of course. So kind of interesting structure for sure. And the big part that you probably recognize is this amazing part right here, which is just absolutely phenomenal. So, you know, the structure and function of all organisms is just completely fascinating. You can see the structure under this. You'll also be recognizing this. Okay, this is once again not real, certainly not real. This is, I wouldn't do that. So this is a model magic egg. We use these in classes. A lot of teachers use this because they can compare the size of this egg with a regular chicken egg, and it is quite a bit larger. Abby will be talking about this function or this structure also. This is, once again, a model, but, you know, take a look at this and you can see, you know, you can kind of just see the power of this and the way that, once again, the structure and function of this. And then we'll also be talking about these. And these are real. This is not a model, but you can take a look at how these look up close. And then also it's really hard sometimes to see the size, like the dimension or the scale. And you can kind of see how it would fit on, you know, one of my fingers here. So that kind of gives you an idea of the size. So with those little prompts, I'm gonna turn the program over to Abby, and we really hope that you enjoy the program. We just can't get enough of our bald eagles, and we're really happy that you're here with us this morning. So with that, Abby, I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm Abby, as Kate introduced me. Everyone just make sure, I know she mentioned this already, to take note of Kate's email if you do come across anything that I don't touch on that you have questions about even after the program. For those of you who don't know, Duke Farms has a nesting pair of bald eagles on the property. So I'm going to be talking a lot about them, but also about eagles in general. So we're going to start off. So what is a bald eagle? We're going to start off by talking about what is a bald eagle. So bald eagles are birds, but what makes a bird a bird? So birds are warm-blooded, okay, just like us. We have the ability to regulate our body temperature. We don't need the help of outside sources, like maybe you've seen some turtles or snakes basking in the sun because they are cold-blooded. So they need help from the sun to kind of bring their body temperature up. So birds, just like us, are warm-blooded. They're also vertebrates, just like us. They have a bony skeletal system. They have a backbone. They also have feathers, wings, and beaks. So we don't have any of those things. So now we're starting to differ, right, from birds. So not all birds necessarily fly, but they do have wings, they do have feathers, and they have beaks instead of teeth. Okay, digging in a little bit deeper, a bald eagle is a bird. A bald eagle is a bird of prey. Okay, so here's a whole poster of different types of birds of prey. And again, I have to ask the question, what makes a bird of prey a bird of prey? So these are the things that we're going to look out for. Birds of prey have hooked beaks, okay, as identified here. They have sharp talons, identified below. They have keen eyesight, so they can see really, really well. And that's because they need to hunt for their food, which is another thing that makes them a bird of prey. So Their keen eyesight helps them find their prey. Their sharp talons help them catch their food, and their hooked beaks help them eat and pull apart their food. So they're not catching food with their beaks. They're catching food with their talons and then eating and pulling apart their food with their hooked beaks. And there are many different kinds of birds of prey, not just eagles. So you can see here, there's a lot on this poster. Owls, falcons, all types of different kinds of birds are categorized as birds of prey. So now we're going to start talking about the life cycle of a bald eagle. We're going to start by talking about the egg, which Kate showed at the beginning of the program. So here is a domestic chicken egg, right? Something you may find in your fridge, compared to a bald eagle egg. And you can see that the bald eagle egg is significantly larger than the chicken egg, because bald eagles themselves are significantly larger than a chicken. So their eggs are a little bit larger. Here is someone holding a bald eagle egg in their hand. So you can kind of get an idea of how big the eggs really are when sitting in someone's hand. Okay. Here I have zoomed in a little bit on the texture of a bald eagle egg. And this is something that you may not know because you've probably never been that close to a bald eagle egg before. So looking closely, especially at this section where there's a little bit of a shadow beginning to start, you can see these pores all along the outside of the eggshell. So look closely at that texture, okay? Like right around here. And those pores, just like our skin has pores, those pores allow oxygen to pass through the eggshell from the outside of the egg, right? And then CO2 to pass outside of the egg. So there's oxygen coming in, CO2 going out. So those pores are really important for that little chick that's growing inside that egg. Okay, so more egg photos. Here are two separate photos of two eggs that are in an eagle nest. The first one right here, we see that they're just, normal eggs. The incubation period, so the amount of time that these eggs need to be sat on and warmed by their parents is about 34 to 36 days. So that's just over a month. That's a really, really long time to have to sit on eggs, like basically the whole time they're sitting on these eggs to warm them. And it's really important that the female and the male switch off while doing this, and they do just that. They work together as a team, incubating these eggs for 34 to 36 days until they are ready to hatch. And sometimes it's even longer, because if the more eggs you have, the longer you have to incubate, because usually the eggs are at least a couple days apart. So those eggs that are, laid later need to still be incubated later into the month. Their clutch size is about 1 to 3 eggs. So generally, that means that generally bald eagles are laying anywhere from 1 to 3 eggs. Moving on to the second photo, I'm sure you're all noticing something that's a little bit different in this photo. These eggs have what we call a pip. So when a pip is created in the eggshell, that basically means that the chick that's inside is starting to hatch, right? It's kind of knocking out that shell and getting ready to come out and fully hatch. So this is like a really big moment when paying attention to the eagle cam, because you've waited all of this time. You've seen the eagles build their nests, fixing their nest. You've seen them incubating their eggs for over a month, and now finally we're seeing the pip in the egg. So this is a really pivotal moment if you're big into watching eagle cams. Okay, so now there's a whole bunch of cuteness happening, right? This first photo, we see two little wobbly chicks. So these guys just are like just hatched. This is a photo from 2019 from the Duke Farms eagle nest. So once they hatch, they're kind of just like flopping all over the place. They can't really hold their head up. They can't hold their bodies up. You can see that they're kind of slouched forward a little bit. And then around week 2, they look like this second photo, right? You can see they're sitting up straight, they're holding their heads up, and they're starting to grow. They're still little fluff balls, but they have more control over their body. Okay, so I did say that birds are warm-blooded, right? They can regulate their body temperatures. But up until these eagle chicks are 10 to 14 days old, they still need help, right? They still need help regulating their body temperature. So we see here a chick that is still hatched out of their egg, but still being sat on by either the male or female eagle. And that is, again, to help them bring their body temperature up until they are able to do that themselves. Okay, now we're around 3 weeks old, okay? You can't really understand the size of a bald eagle just from looking at the cam, because they are just so large, and we're gonna see a little comparison later on. But like comparing this first photo, they don't look that big. And then looking at the second photo, you can kind of get a better sense of how big they actually are because it's like a zoomed in photo. So you can see that they don't really look like bald eagles yet, right? They're still kind of fluffy, kind of fuzzy. This is their thermal down coming that they have, right? That fluffiness. But if you look closely at the first photo, right where my cursor is, there's these dark spots coming in. And this is their juvenile feathers starting to come in. So once those feathers come in almost completely, this is what they look like. Okay, so here's another photo from the Duke Farms nest. This year in particular, we had 3 eggs and all of them hatched. And you can kind of guesstimate on how old, or the order, I guess, that these chicks hatched, right? This one that's first in the photo, it looks like it has a lot of that down still. Their juvenile feathers haven't come in as much. So we could assume maybe this is the last egg that was hatched. This one is kind of half and half, right? It has both the thermal down and those juvenile feathers. And then this one looks like it's mostly, has those juvenile feathers coming in. So eagle cams, using the eagle cam is really, really interesting way to like see what these eagles are doing and how they grow. By 4 weeks old, these nestlings are fully grown. Imagine being 4 weeks old and you're just as big as you're gonna get. They're still gonna change because they still don't look like bald eagles yet. They don't look like the bald eagles that we know, but they're fully grown at this point. From 5 to 6 weeks is generally when they are banded. So Kate was showing us those bands in the beginning. And here's another little zoom up of them. You can see really well in this photo. So there's 2 bands that they get banded with. One is a state band. So that's the green band that is C94. Green is New Jersey. Every state has their own color. So New Jersey's green. And the silver band is a federal band, so like nationwide. And as these eagles are getting banded, they're also getting blood samples taken, they're recording their measurements. And this allows state biologists to keep track of any trends that they see and try to, do some digging into what's happening, right? So if they're looking at blood samples, they could be looking for pesticides, they could be looking for all different kinds of metals, and that might give them some insight into what's going on in the natural world around these eagles. Okay, so here's the photo I was talking about where you get to like really see how large these eagles are. This is Kate, who we met, right, in the beginning of the program. She's holding a juvenile bald eagle. This was the banding that was done at Duke Farms in 2018. So these eagles are 5 to 6 weeks old, and this is how big they are, about as big as her whole torso, like even a little bit bigger. And you can see at the bottom here that this eagle's talons are wrapped up, and that is to protect Kate and also to protect the bird because those talons are really, really sharp. And then here, a beautiful profile of a juvenile bald eagle. Okay, now we're at 6 to 7 weeks. We're not seeing much of that thermal down anymore. We're seeing like maybe just little teeny tiny bits and pieces, but we're seeing juvenile plumage now, almost fully at 6 to 7 weeks. And these are both photos from the Duke Farms nest, the first one in 2019, the second one in 2016. Right. Now, at about 9 to 10 weeks old, we get to see something really, really cool. So these juvenile bald eagles start doing something that we call branching. And what branching is basically these nestlings are walking out onto the branches of their home tree and kind of testing the waters to understand what it would be like to fly. They're getting ready to leave the nest, not for good, because they still are going to hang out at the nest. They're not just going to fly away one time and then be gone, but they're going to fly away for the first time. And the nest at Duke Farms is 80 feet high in a tree. So that's really, really high to have to literally jump off and just start flying. So this is kind of them testing the waters, getting ready to fly for the first time. This first photo, you can see that there's one eagle that's kind of out on the branch looking out and seeing what's going on. The second photo is really cool that someone was able to capture this. This eagle is up, its wings are spread, it looks like it's ready to go, and I'm pretty sure I'm not seeing any contact of those talons on that branch. So that bird looks like it's just going for it at that point. Okay, now we're seeing that bald eagle that we're used to seeing. So here we have a juvenile bald eagle as the first photo compared to an adult bald eagle. And you can notice all of those little changes. Well, the head is a big change, right? It goes from being brown to being bright white. But then you see the little changes, like the beak has changed color, the eye has changed colors. And we can take a little bit of a closer look on that progression here on this slide. So at a half-year-old, this eagle is still considered juvenile. And it's mainly brown, right? We just saw that. Its beak is still dark, its eye is still dark. And then at 1 year right here, we're getting to an immature state. 1.5 years, we're seeing the eagle's really starting to change color a little bit. Its beak is still dark, its eye is getting a little bit lighter. 2.5 years, whoa, it's really speckled with white. Its eye is getting even lighter, its beak is getting even yellower. 3.5 years, I would say this is the point where if you saw a bald eagle at 3.5 years, you would know it was a bald eagle. The years prior, if you don't know what a juvenile or early immature bald eagle looks like, it's going to be really hard to identify it because they just look so different. But at 3.5 years is really when we're seeing that like ultimate change into almost becoming an adult and being able to recognize this bird as a bald eagle. Just a little bit like dirty throughout the head, a little bit of brown scattered throughout, but we're seeing a distinction between that white head, brown body, yellow beak. At 4 years old, we're an adult now, okay? 4.5 years old, still a little bit darker on the head. And then 5 years old, definitive plumage. You can see just how bright the head is, even in comparison to half a year before, just 6 months earlier. I'm gonna give you guys like a couple seconds just to look at this photo down here at the bottom and see if you can guess the ages of these bald eagles. So take a look at the bottom photo, compare it to the top, and see if you can kind of estimate how old these bald eagles are. There actually was no answer on this photo that I found, but we can guess, right? We can make assumptions. We can use the information that we have to create an educated guess for ourselves. So I would say that this first bald eagle is probably a juvenile, okay? Probably at about a half a year, six months, right? The second eagle, I would guess, I don't know if you guys would guess this as well, probably in between 1.5 and 2.5 years. And I only say that because the beak hasn't started changing yet. It doesn't really look any sort of, you know, I'm not seeing any yellowness really, but I am seeing like an in-between speckledness of the feathers that are changing. And then this last eagle, I would say we're not at definitive plumage yet. I would guess that we're at 4.5 years old because we're seeing a little bit of brown still on the head. And looks like this guy's got a little fish in his mouth. So we're going to talk about that too. Characteristics of a bald eagle. We talked about, you know, their white head, they have white tail feathers, yellow beak, yellow talons, brown body, right? They have an 8-foot long wingspan. If you just compare that to how tall you are, just to get an estimate of how big these birds really are. Their wingspan is 8 feet long. Imagine how big their nest must be if there's 1, 2, maybe even 3 eggs that need to grow up, that need to, you know, hatch and grow up in that nest. Down here at the bottom left, we have a nesting pair of bald eagles. On the left, this is a male, okay? And on the right, we have a female. And they look very similar, but there is one big difference. And it is that the female is slightly larger than the male. So the female runs at about 14 pounds and the male is at about 10 pounds. A reason for this is that it gives the female a little bit more of an edge when incubating those eggs because she's a little bit more bigger, like she's a little bigger than the male. So she has a little bit of a head up when incubating. The male is a little bit smaller and that probably gives him a little bit of a heads up when he's hunting for food, right? It makes him maybe a little bit stealthier. Bald eagle habitat range. So in this first map, we can see everything that's in red is the habitat range for an eagle. So we're not seeing anything over in Australia, Europe, Africa, no bald eagles over here. Okay, we're seeing mainly North America, specifically the United States and Canada. And we see a little bit of a closer up here on the map to the right. There's almost no parts of the US that aren't home to the bald eagle, right? We have a little bit of Alaska that's not colored, a little bit of New Mexico, a little bit of Texas, but they are really mainly found in the United States and a whole bunch of Canada too. So we need to make sure to create a beautiful home for these bald eagles because just like us, you know, they're using this land too. So more specifically, not talking geographically anymore, but where do these bald eagles live? Okay, we can see that and we've seen previously, they live in nests, right? We know that. Mature bald eagles will build their nests in tall trees with well-spaced and reachable branches. Mature bald eagles. So once bald eagles reach adulthood, that is when they start building their nest. I mentioned before that the Duke Farms eagle nest is 80 feet up in a tree. So they're using tall trees. They're really big, so they don't want to be low to the ground. They want to be up and out of eyesight, but also have a view of what's going on. Those well-spaced branches are really important for the stability of the nest. If you have if you have 2 branches and you're putting a nest here, it's not going to be as stable as if you had 3 branches and you're putting a nest here because it's really like cupping the nest and creating like a space for the nest to fall into. Those reachable branches are important for when for what happens at 9 to 10 weeks old. Remember, we were talking about branching. So it's important for those nestlings to have that space to get ready to fledge and to fly for the first time. Sometimes you will see bald eagle nests on man-made structures, like the power line structures, bridges, things like that. They're typically built by the water, and that is because of their food sources and what they like to eat. So we'll get a little bit into that soon. And their nests can weigh as much as 1 ton, and they can be 10 feet in diameter. So that's really, really big. So 10 feet in diameter means if we're looking at the center of the nest, we draw a line from the edge all the way to the other edge, straight through the middle, 10 feet long. Okay, remember we were talking about how big an eagle wingspan is? Now think about 2 more feet added onto that, and that's the size of their nest. Can be the size of their nest. Oh, yes, and this is the photo of the Duke Farms eagle nest right here from far away, 80 feet up in that sycamore tree. So that just gives you a little bit of a better idea of how tall, how high up that nest is. Okay, so take a couple seconds to think about what a bald eagle uses to build its nest. If you're not sure, look at the photos. What do you see? What do you see around the bald eagle nest? Around in the habitat of the bald eagles, you know, the second photo gives you kind of a wider angle shot so you can kind of see. So just take some guesses. What does a bald eagle use to build its nest? Okay, so sticks, branches, and twigs. That one was pretty simple. We saw a lot of sticks in those photos that we were looking at. They also use plant stalks, grass, seaweed, moss, lichen, a whole bunch of soft stuff as well, like soft padding. So I'm gonna play this video very quickly. 2:15 we want to get to. And this shows 2 bald eagles creating their nest, adding to their nest. So we see one in the nest flying off. We see those sticks around. And what does that bald eagle have now? And what is it doing? Okay. Oh, and there's another one. Here's our nesting pair together. They're building up their nest together as a team. Just like how they incubate their eggs as a team, they're building up their nest, fixing it up for when they're ready to lay their eggs, incubating and raising those chicks. And we talked about how the males are a little bit smaller than the females. We can see here that this is the female. She is much larger than the male who is off to the left. And you can see they're very like weirdly specific about where these sticks are going. Fluffing up the padding, they're kind of like pulling the stick out of each other's mouths. They want to put it in themselves. So it's really interesting to watch their behaviors and how they work together as a team. Okay, so here are 2 photos to kind of look at and observe the evolution of the Duke Farms nest. So the first photo is in 2016. The second photo was taken in 2020. So look at each photo, compare them. What looks the same? What looks different? Aside from the fact that one has eagles in them and one doesn't, what are you seeing? What are you observing? What are you noticing? What looks the same? What looks different? Make some observations. Did you guys come up with some stuff? I'll tell you what I'm observing. So what I see is that the branching of the tree in 2016 is the same as the branching in 2020. So what that leads me to believe is that these eagles reuse their nest every single year, which they do if they can, right? There was an incident in, I think it was 2013, which is when Sandy hit, right? These eagles had to rebuild after Sandy because their nest was damaged. You can see that from when they rebuilt, a few years later, they have established in 2016 a very successful nest. It's very large. The sticks are kind of like bordering around. And then in 2020, you can see just how much they built it up, right? There's so much more of an edge to protect those chicks that are going to be a little bit more vulnerable. There's a little bit more padding. So you can kind of see the evolution of the nest. Okay, so these photos are really cool. This is the installation of the Eagle Cam itself. Again, I know I've said this multiple times, 80 feet up in a sycamore tree is how high up this nest is. So this climber had to go 80 feet up in the tree to install this camera. So that sounds like really scary, but also super fun. And here's the camera itself mounted to the tree. And we can tell that this is a sycamore tree based on these little seed balls that are hanging and the leaves that we can see in this photo and the bark. So again, some photos from the nest, just the male and female, then the male and female with 2 eggs in the nest, and then a photo of them feeding their offspring. So the camera really lets us understand the behaviors and why eagles live the way that they live, the things that they're doing to survive. And it gives us insight on how they grow and how they raise their offspring. So it's just a really, really great resource to have. And I'm glad that we can share it with all of you. And I hope that you start watching the Eagle Cam if you haven't watched it yet. Okay, some other great photos. Can you spot an eagle in this first photo? It's a little difficult because they have a white head and this guy is snowed in. I don't know if this is the male or the female. I'm pretty sure it's the male from what I can remember from this photo being taken. But here is its head right here sticking out. And it shows how dedicated these eagles are as parents and how embedded that instinct is in them. Because this eagle is literally covered in snow and it is still incubating those eggs. This was taken during this year, 2021, during a snowstorm. And then the male and female together in the second photo, and this is 2018 during a snowstorm. I'm not sure if they're incubating at this period in time, but they are together in the nest getting snowed on. So that's just a sweet photo to look at. Okay, so here is the Duke Farms Eagle Cam. We'll take like a couple seconds just to see what's going on. I don't know if anyone has checked out the Eagle Cam this year up until this point to see what's happening. But we see 1 and we see 2 chicks in the nest. And we see either the male or female. A good way to tell the male and female apart at the Duke Farms nest, aside from size, right? Aside from the male being smaller than the male is banded. So if you see bands, it's most likely the male. If you're not seeing bands, it's probably the female. Assuming that it's not like an intruder bald eagle, another adult bald eagle that's there. So yes, the male is banded, female is not banded. And it looks like maybe we're gonna start, are we looking for food? I'm not sure. We'll come back to this if we have time at the end, but this is what's going on right now. Did I go too far? Okay, here we go. So now we're going to talk about what bald eagles eat. I mentioned before that they tend to build their nests closer to the water, and this is because they love fish. They'll eat stuff, they'll eat other stuff that comes from the water, and we're going to see that too, but they love fish. We're always seeing fish in the nest. So we have an American shad here, a rainbow trout. Both of these are very common to see in the nest. Common carp right here. Musk turtle shell, right? So they like turtles too. We see a lot of turtle shells in the nest. White sucker, taking up most of that photo, hard to miss. And then there's a lamprey all up in the center of this photo. So yeah, they love fish, but they don't just eat fish. They also eat mammals, okay? They eat raccoons, they eat rabbits, they eat deer, they eat squirrel. They eat ducks and waterfowl, and they also eat carrion. I don't know if this is a new term for any of you, but carrion basically is roadkill or dead animals that they're finding. And you can see this eagle is picking those bones clean. They are not picky eaters, all right? It kind of seems like they're gonna eat whatever they can find, as long as it's big enough and they can find enough of it, right? So they don't eat small things like maybe backyard birds do. They're not eating seeds, they're not eating insects. They need something that's gonna sustain them. Okay, so bald eagle conservation. Let's talk a little bit about DDT. DDT is a pesticide that was heavily used in the 1940s to combat insect-borne human diseases. So we can see here that there's a small aircraft flying over what is most likely, I would assume, an agricultural field, spraying DDT, right? So spraying a chemical all over this field to combat insect-borne human diseases. We can see even spraying it on humans themselves, right? We have sprayed chemicals on ourselves to try to combat a problem. But by doing that, we're creating more problems for ourselves. Here is an ad for DDT in the 1940s, okay? Everyone's happy. We have our cow, a potato, a chicken, an apple, a dog, and a human singing, DDT is good for me. It's not. And it's definitely not good for bald eagles, and it's not good for the natural world around us. So let's talk a little bit more about Rachel Carson's impact on this. Rachel Carson was an eco warrior. She was the real life Lorax, okay? She spoke for the trees, she spoke for the insects, the birds, the fish. She really had a great impact in combating the use of DDT regularly in the United States. And this is all thanks to her last and most famous book, Silent Spring, which she wrote in 1962. I just read Silent Spring for the first time, and I don't know why I waited so long. I actually had to read it for class, and she is an amazing storyteller. If you haven't read this book, I highly suggest it. She just has a great way of giving you the facts, right? You have the science, you have the numbers, but you also have the story that goes along with it. And you really understand the devastation that DDT caused in the natural world and how everything is interconnected and how the use of DDT really was kind of like a domino effect, right, throughout the natural world. So I'm just gonna read a part of the back of the book to give you guys a little bit more of an understanding of how great of an impact this book had on society. So rarely does a single book alter the course of history, but Rachel Carson's Silent Spring did exactly that. The outcry that followed its publication in 1962 forced the banning of DDT and spurred revolutionary changes in the laws affecting our air, land, and water. Carson's passionate concern for the future of our planet reverberated powerfully through the world, and her eloquent book was instrumental in launching the environmental movement. It is without question one of the landmark books of the 20th century. So if that gives you any encouragement to kind of check this out and see a part of history, really is what it was. And it's good for all ages too. So she really is an amazing storyteller. Getting into how DDT specifically affected bald eagles, we can see here, yes, it affected much of the natural elements, right? But specifically for bald eagles, we saw an enormous population decline. So by 1963, there were only 487 nesting pairs, meaning that there was only about 1,000 individuals, right? 1,000 individual bald eagles by 1963, okay? It's not that long ago, right? We're only in 2021, right? So it's really not that long ago. 487 nesting pairs we see here. 1972 was the DDT ban, right about here. And we're seeing this amazing correlation between stopping the use of DDT and the increase of the bald eagle population, right? We're seeing like a great amount of growth throughout the years. This graph stops in 2006, but even then we had almost, almost 10,000 pairs of bald eagles. So that's double individuals, right? So those numbers are really growing. There was a lot of effort put in to make that happen. It didn't just happen. But that's why science is so important, right? We get to see these trends and understand why things happen, make those connections. So the problem with DDT specifically related to bald eagles is that it weakened their eggshells, right? So we know for a fact that the male and female need to incubate those eggs after they're laid. So if those eggshells are weakened and then they need to be incubated, that's going to cause for some devastation in the nest. Okay, so this is a result of what happened. What is really important is that we're not here anymore. We did a lot of work to increase the bald eagle population and to make sure that this wasn't going to be their fate, right? So it was really negative, right? But now it's really positive and we need to keep working towards that. So nest hacking was something that was started, I think in the mid 70s, this started, the mid 1970s. And the point of nest hacking was to create more of a controlled environment for bald eagle eggs specifically. So here's a hacking tower, and this is meant to simulate a normal nesting site. You can see it's higher up in the air. And each little compartment, you can see there's a compartment here, and all the way around. So how this worked is scientists would take bald eagle eggs from the nest, right, out in the wilds, bring those eggs to the hacking sites, raise them in a controlled environment, incubate them until they hatched, and then would continue to raise them at that hacking site. And we can see here on this top photo, more on the right-hand side, if you can see my cursor, they wanted to make sure that these chicks weren't imprinting on humans, right? They wanted to make sure that they had as much of a normal upbringing that they could have, so that they knew still how to be eagles. They knew how to act, because these eagles are going back into the wilds, right? We're not keeping them. They're not staying at these hacking sites. The point is to raise them and then put them back into the wild to increase the amount of eggs that we're actually able to hatch. So this is a hand with a bald eagle puppet, basically, on someone's hand feeding a bald eagle chick. So what they see is that they're getting fed by an adult bald eagle. These eagles were also kept close by, again, for imprinting reasons, right? To feed off of each other's energy and to know how to be a bald eagle, but they were kept separately to control sibling aggression. So when you have more than one chick in the nest, they tend to fight over food, compete even a little bit with each other in that small environment. They're still competing with each other. So to avoid any sort of sibling aggression, they're kept separately. Eventually, these eagles go back to their nests. They're put back in their nests. They fledge from their nest, their original nest. And then once they're an adult, they generally come back to that area where their nest is, right? Where they fledged from is where they come back to. So by having these hacking sites, having this controlled environment, making sure these eggs are successful, being raised successfully, and then putting them back into the wild, we're kind of creating, we're creating more successful adult bald eagles, right? We're hoping that by doing that, they're going to come back to these areas and then create their own nests and have their own eggs and raise their offspring. So that was another effort that was done to help increase the bald eagle population. Okay, so GPS tracking. One thing I didn't talk about on the banding slide, which I'm going to talk about now, I wanted to keep them separate because I wanted to put this with conservation. There are these little GPS trackers that are really cool. They kind of fit the eagle like a backpack. And when they're getting banded, they're fitted with these transmitters. You can see here, here, and down here. It's highlighted. The bottom right photo is the Duke Farms eagle nest. So by having them with this GPS tracker, scientists are able to see where these bald eagles go, right? After they fledge, where are they going? What are they doing? Where are they coming back to, right? Like I said, that once they fledge, they come back to the area where they fledged from when they're an adult. So we get to really see that. And that information is available to the public so that they can also see and understand what's going on. It also helps to keep track and make sure that those bald eagles are still going, right? If a transmitter stops, it's either not working anymore, they're solar powered, but they don't last forever. So either the transmitter has died or something happened to that eagle, and they can either be, found or were, not found. So by finding them, being able to have the option to find them, we can then figure out what's going on, do some testing if testing needs to be done. I hope that's all making sense to everyone. Okay, so this is the really cool part about the GPS trackers. You can look and see for yourselves where these bald eagles are going and what is happening. And it's laid out in a really, really cool way. So this first map is from Eagle Tracks from New Jersey Conserved Wildlife. You can just Google Eagle Tracks with an X and New Jersey Conserved Wildlife, and this page will pop up. And we can see up at the top bar, there are 4 different eagles, okay? Once you click on those eagles, you're able to click on the month and the year that you want to look at, and it will break down where that eagle has flown. These points on the map aren't given in real time, okay? And that's to protect the eagle. So that might be a concern that you have. Why are they releasing this information to the public? We want to protect eagles. Why are we giving people access to this information? They are not released the exact day and time that these eagles are in those spots. So if that gives you any form of comfort, these eagles are still safe because the time that is on these maps are lagging to where they actually are in real time. So these pinpoints that are on the map right now are from Duke. Okay, the eagle up here, the last eagle, Duke, is from Duke Farms, fledged from the Duke Farms nest in 2018. And you can see where he's been. This is New Jersey. Also, the maps are not detailed. You can see, sort of get an idea of where they are, but you're not going to really be able to specifically pinpoint because these maps don't have so much detail. We can see we're in central Jersey now. Okay, so Duke has come back for a little bit, which is really cool. And then the second map is a whole bunch of different eagle pinpoints, GPS points from 2007 to 2014 from the Center of Conservation Biology. And again, this map is giving us insight onto like where eagles are going, the outliers, right? We see over here is maybe an outlier. Over here is an outlier where there's not as many pinpoints. We can see they kind of stop in Florida, right? They don't go all the way down. So, and there's kind of a gap here. Why is that happening? And having this information lets us make educated guesses on why these things are happening. We see a lot of dense GPS points along the East Coast. So here we have a lot, whereas we have kind of like random gaps throughout the map over here and up here. So yes, we have 5 more minutes left. That's all I have. I'm gonna go back to the Eagle Cam and we can kind of turn that on and see if there's anything interesting happening. Okay, here we are.
Can I ask, I'd like to answer some of the questions also.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so as we're watching it, there was an interesting question about how much eagles can carry and you know, the size of things that they can bring in the nest, because you know, one of the indicators that we had up on the screen was that they do eat deer. Well, a lot of the deer that they eat are dead already, so it's carrion, but eagles are known to carry over 100% of their weight. So if it's a 14-pound eagle, it can carry a little bit more than 14 pounds. But a lot of that answer relates to the type of thing that they're carrying. If it's streamlined, it might be easier for them to carry something. If it's kind of wide, it might be more difficult because you have to take into consideration wind, the weather, and also the aerodynamics of what they're carrying. But certainly you can imagine picking up your own weight and carrying it through the sky, sometimes for miles. So it's an incredible feat, but that was a really interesting question. Another question was about the hacking towers and whether they're used now. And of course, eagles have been on the rise, and that has to do with a lot of the policies, a lot of the changes, the arrest of the use of DDT, and also people's understanding of our keeping our waters clean and healthy. So hacking towers were a way of kind of jump starting, so to speak, the eagle population, because you know there were only just a few around, just a few. And now it's not uncommon for us to hear that someone has seen an eagle flying by, and that has to do with everyone's efforts to keep our environment clean, and also laws against pollution and all sorts of things that happen in the water. So, you know, we just have to keep doing the right things and be able to see the benefits of our wildlife. And certainly the bald eagle is a tremendously powerful and positive message of what we can all do to make changes, healthy changes for our Earth. So there was also a question about the third egg. And, you know, it's at the time where it probably would have hatched by now, quite honestly. Abby talked about how many days, but, you know, not all eggs hatch. Not all animals are even born healthy. So, you know, this is wildlife. We never know what's going to happen. That's why it's so interesting to observe it and to learn more about it and to research it. So we want to just thank you very much for joining us. And, you know, I can't encourage you enough to just keep your Eagle Cam on. I mean, that's, it's the best thing to watch. There's always something exciting and something interesting happening. So we want to thank you very much for joining us. We thank you very much for, um, you know, kind of tuning into Duke Farms. We hope that you take some of the other classes that are coming up and also explore our distance learning portal. And of course, the best thing ever would be for you to visit us and walk on the 18 miles of trails that we have available for you. So with that, I'm going to sign off. Once again, my name is Kate Riley. The email is KREILLY@Duke Farms. If you have any questions that kind of pop up, just shoot me an email and I'm more than happy to answer it. So Abby, I'm going to sign off. I mean, I could watch this Eagle Cam the rest of the day, so it's very hard for me to say goodbye to everyone. But you know, we hope to see you soon in another class. And
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you everyone so much for joining us.